And if you want to have a happier life, do something painful every day. It doesn't take very much pain, but you just have to do that to show your body that you're in charge and to change your dopamine signaling.
Welcome to the Smarter Not Harder podcast, your home for 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. I'm your host, Dr. HUSO. Among today's $64,000 questions are, what is the laziness principle and how do you use it to make you stronger and more adaptable? Number 2, what is exposomics and epigenetics and how can you hack the exposome and epigenome? Number 3, can spirituality be hacked and how? Giving his 1 cent solutions is our guest, Dave Asprey, who has written a book that is also the namesake of this podcast and of my company, Smarter Not Harder. Dave attended UC Santa Barbara and majored in computer science and later earned his undergraduate degree in computer information systems from Cal State University, Stanislaus. He went on to earn an MBA from Wharton. Dave is the creator of Bulletproof Coffee and founder of the Bulletproof Company. A New York Times bestselling author, he hosts the top 100 podcast, The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey, and has been featured in Men's Health, Wired, and Vogue, and on the Joe Rogan Experience, CNN, and hundreds of other outlets. Called the Father of Biohacking, Dave has spent the last 2 decades working alongside world-renowned doctors and thought leaders to unlock new levels of human potential. He lives in Austin, Texas. All right. I'm sorry, guys. This is just not my day. I'm experiencing so much technical difficulties, but I'm having such a wonderful time with Dave. And as I showed him earlier, I did prepare for this session with him. And we were talking about type 1 and type 2 errors, and Dave carried that over to how our body actually resists spending more energy than it has to on many activities of the body. And the body does that sort of like instinctively, since the meat OS, as he calls it, is really only built to make us survive and reproduce. So, Dave, in the clinical specialty that I started called Health Optimization, Medicine and Practice, we created a module called Evolutionary Medicine. As you were saying, from the evolutionary lens, the body does not want to use any more energy than what it needs to survive and reproduce. Health and happiness then become an inside job. So how does it become an inside job, Dave?
Recognizing that your body doesn't care even a little bit if you're happy or even healthy. It would prefer to be healthy. It's less stressed if you're healthy, but its goals are make sure you don't die, make sure you reproduce. So biohacking, the definition is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so that you have full control of your own biology. Recognize your meat operating system listens to the world around you. It listens to signals that are not the same as you. That's important. And even in the context of evolutionary biology, one of the primary theories is the one you just talked about minimizing energy use as a survival strategy so you don't starve to death from lack of energy. Pretty strong. The other thing, though, is that for every life form on the planet, each one evolves its own user interface on reality. So right now,
I agree with that.
When you look at me, even if it's in the same room, you're not actually seeing me. You're not looking at where each blood cell is. You're not looking at the proton spin. You're not looking at all the wavelengths of infrared that I put off. So you're seeing an icon that represents me.
That sounds like Hoffman.
Indeed,
right?
That's the case against reality.
Case against reality,
and that's the other competing evolutionary theory, and they actually are both real, both for minimizing energy and for having a good user interface. So what part of you creates your user interface on reality? It's your meat, and it has an operating system. You can put new icons on your phone. You can change the background color of your screen. It has icons on it. You can change your icons on the world. You can change your perception of the world by changing your operating system. And what Smarter Not Harder teaches you to do is to tell your operating system what you want it to feel. So it will make you feel things. Just recognize it controls how you feel. It's not your thoughts that control how you feel. It's your feelings that control what you think. And when you do that, you're like, oh, well, let me do this to my body. And then my body will feel at ease, and then I won't have anxiety. So maybe your anxiety isn't because of your mother-in-law. Your anxiety is because of your tissues, and your mother-in-law is who you blamed for it. And frankly, your mother-in-law may be misbehaving. And emotional stress is real, but a huge amount of what people think is emotional stress is operating system dysfunction. So you fix the hardware and suddenly the software works fine. And then your mother-in-law doesn't make you mad. You're like, oh, look at her. She's trying to get a rise out of me, but she's not going to get a rise out of me. You know, I actually feel compassion for her because her mom was probably really mean to her, which is why she's so mean to everyone around her, if that's your situation, right? I'm just picking a stereotypical one. So this comes down to how stable is my operating system? And the way you make it stable is you take it right to the edge of breaking, and then you make it feel really safe. And then it goes, oh, let me become even more stable. And you can do this from a meditation, from an oxygen exposure level. And the way I came across all this, part of it comes from my work at 40 Years of Zen. This is a brain upgrade program where we've had more than 1,500 high-performance people, like entrepreneurs and celebrities and pro athletes come through. It's a company I started. We have 7 patents behind our neuroscience technologies right now. And we take 5 days of like really, really intense work on upgrading your brain. So you can sort of see what's going on when you get to go deep. And then I also opened Upgrade Labs in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And at Upgrade
You're crazy.
Labs,
because you have so much energy.
Apparently, it's because I'm lazy. That's exactly it. And
lazy and crazy.
There you go. It's a good match. In fact, laziness does drive all of human progress. You think about it. Like I didn't want to walk, so I figured I could ride a horse. I didn't want to feed the horse, so I built a car. And like that sort of thing. All of our cool stuff comes from us being lazy. And your hardware, the meat operating system, saying, is there a lazier way to do that? And it's usually get a machine to do it for you.
No, I think they built a car. Remember, Dave, the story? They built a car because there was so much poop of horses in New York that they didn't want to use horses anymore. And so they started to invent a car. So because I don't want to smell horse.
I totally believe anymore. That. Yeah, horses do have that unfortunate exhaust problem. So what cars do is they aerosolize their exhaust. So you don't have piles of exhaust in the streets. You just breathe it.
Well, speaking of breathing in and eating in stuff, let's get to some of the meat of the book. Your first advice is to remove friction. And at a later chapter, you finally use the word exposomics. We do have a module in the Home Hope Academy on clinical exposomics. And one of the things we discuss there is the weed killer glyphosate. Can you explain to us, Dave, what the exposome is and what's glyphosate got to do with it?
You're one of the few guys I know who knows what the exposome is. So thanks for spreading the word about that. In fact, the first time most of us were exposed to that word was an article in Wired magazine about 15 years ago. And the exposome is the set of everything you're exposed to throughout your life. Given that your environment controls epigenetics, which is what genes in your hardware get turned on or off.
You're right.
Well, the exposome is the set of things that might have turned genes on or off. And that's kind of cool because now we can really, really go deep on how to hack your operating by changing what you're exposed to in your exposome.
So in part of the exposome, the way as a physician, the way I remind myself of the exposome is, for example, it's the sum of all of your exposures. So, for example, if your mother has been drinking while she was pregnant with you, then that's a part of your alcohol exposure, right? It's for example, for the fetal alcohol syndrome types of cases. Now, you also speak of exposure to chemicals in food, the big ones being phytates and lectins. I first met Steve Gundry at a Gut Microbiota conference in Paris, and that's where I learned about lectins. What are lectins and why might you want to avoid them?
Are you telling me you didn't read the Bulletproof Diet? It's chapter 1 of the Bulletproof Diet.
I did. I was being nice to the new listeners here. And I'm pretending not to know lectins, Dave, because we are both based on evolution, with the evolutionary lens. We know that these plants want to protect themselves.
I know that you know what they are. So there's in my first big diet book, in the first chapter, I wrote about 5 plant toxins that are affecting us in different ways. Lectins are one of them, which are plant defense compounds that cause inflammation, but in some people more than others, and not all of them are bad because you make lectins yourself. I wrote about omega-6 oils, and I wrote about oxalates, like you'll find in spinach, and you'll find in kale. And then I wrote about phytic acid, but I only wrote about it in the first chapter. Like, this is a problem, but phytic acid doesn't cause an immediate problem like oxalates, like spinach. You feel that that furriness on the back of your teeth because it has razor sharp crystals, and you can get sore joints the next day from it. Lectins, you feel either sugar cravings or inflammation. So these are short-term things you feel. Phytic acid sucks minerals from your bones and from your cells. So it's a plant toxin, but it takes a while to suck all the minerals out of you so that you crack your teeth the way I did when I was a vegan and then a raw vegan. So what's happened since, 12 years ago when I came out with that, like, here's the set of toxins we're dealing with from Mother Nature, at least the big toxins, there's others. The issue is that we don't really have a good way to get minerals into our bodies anymore. In the past, we would eat food preserved with sea salt or rock salt, which is full of trace minerals, maybe 10 or 20 times more salt than we have today. But magically, there was not high blood pressure and heart disease like there is today. So maybe it's not salt that's the cause.
Yeah,
we were getting trace
I like
minerals.
your assertion actually here in this book that maybe it's not salt that's a cause.
Oh, we know that it's not salt that's the cause. I mean, I have a whole lecture. Geez, like the science on lowering salt is just wrong. But even if it's not sodium, which is one of the big macro minerals, what we're doing is we're eating foods that don't contain minerals the way they used to. And that's because we keep growing plants in soil. Plants suck minerals out of the soil.
Right.
There's no minerals left in the soil unless you do regenerative agriculture like I do on my farm on Vancouver Island, where there's animals that eat healthy plants and then they poop on the ground and restore minerals. Or if you live in the Euphrates Valley and you get a flood with silt every whatever winter, I don't know when the floods in the Euphrates, but since we're
whenever I say it should, I'm kidding.
Right, yeah. Yeah, when the water's not parting for you to walk through it, Ted, I got you. So, I mean, this whole situation is just kind of funny because, okay, we like to think we're getting minerals in our food, but it's not in the soil, so it's not in our food. At the same time, we have these big, mean companies, and they are trying to convince us that peasant food is the healthiest food. Peasant food is what they fed the poorest people, or in Rome, gladiators were actually slaves. And they called the gladiators barley men because they fed them barley because it was the cheapest possible food, not because it was good for you. So what we have now is a bunch of people who have fetishized peasant food. And we think not only is oatmeal good for us, oatmeal is very full of phytic acid. It sucks minerals from your bones. But we do something called overnight oats, where you don't even get to have enough wood for your fire to heat up the water to make oatmeal because the heat would help a little bit with the phytic acid. So what we're doing is we're eating foods that have calories that remove minerals. If you want to be a powerful, full energy human being, you must have all of the minerals necessary for your body to adapt to the world that you're in. If you don't eat enough minerals, or if you eat things that stick to your minerals, you will be deficient. And then even if you do the exercise, even if you do the biohacks in Smarter Not Harder, you won't get good results. So lack of minerals creates friction. I recommend that people take a multi-mineral supplement. It is the least sexy of all the vitamins.
Yes.
It doesn't make your tongue
so important.
Yeah.
As you said, it's so important.
Yeah, and you don't get an energy hit usually from minerals.
Right.
Except maybe magnesium. So you're like, I'm taking these. I think they're working. They're working. And then trace minerals are also important. My new coffee company called Danger Coffee has very high-end, delicious, lab-tested coffee, free of mold. It says mold tested on the label. Not all coffees say mold tested, even if they say they're clean. And on top of that, there's a very large dose of trace minerals, the kind your body can actually absorb and the kind that can bind to toxins even.
Do you add that, Dave, or is that a natural component of the coffee?
It's added.
It's added. Okay.
Yeah, it's a large dose. Like you would have to actually go out and buy trace minerals, or you could just drink the coffee. So
I
you
see.
save money by drinking the coffee, even though it's expensive coffee, because, well, it's high quality coffee and it has, the equivalent of probably $50 a month worth of supplements in it.
Speaking of exposome in food, Dave, for the life of me, ever since a child, whenever I would eat tomato skins, I would get diarrhea, and people would not believe me, right? And
tomato skins are super high in lectins.
Right, and the nightshades, right?
Yep.
And people don't believe me, and they try to keep on feeding me all of these nightshades, and I said, no, I get diarrhea.
You're lucky that's all you get, man. I grew up in New Mexico eating green chili. I used to eat habaneros just raw on top of omelets and things, but I had arthritis since I was 14, diagnosed by a doctor. And for me, nightshades do that. If I eat a sprinkling of cayenne, my joints are sore the next morning. I get GI issues, and you'll see it like in my skin quality in a little bit. And I'll go to a restaurant. Oh, it's not very spicy. Like, it's not that I don't like spice. I love spice. It's that if I eat a little bit of paprika or cayenne, it does this to me.
Right.
But for someone listening to this, you may not have the genes that make you sensitive to those lectins, and then cayenne is good for you. So it's not a good or bad. You have to throw that out. Is it compatible with me? Or is it kryptonite for me?
It's personalized, as you emphasized in your book. You have to personalize your hacks for yourself. Now, your second advice after removing friction was to load up on raw materials, which you already touched on. And you were big on the fat-soluble vitamins, where your acronym is DAKE. Well, my acronym is ADEC, just because in med school they teach you to be alphabetical, right? So can we just have, a quick point-by-point discussion on vitamin D, for example, and cholecalciferol?
Well, I feel like in the functional medicine world, in the biohacking world, vitamin D is something we've all talked about a lot. And most of the world now who's paying attention notice that vitamin D in studies for the last 20 years reduces your chances of getting respiratory infections of any type. It's so weird how that works, but all that information disappeared for 3 years on some social media platforms, but it's still true. So vitamin D has many, many pathways in the body where it helps us. And one of the most important ones is it helps to control how minerals are allocated in the body, especially calcium. So if you were to take your minerals and you're short on vitamin DAKE, D-A-K-N-E, then you're not going to get the minerals into the cells, even if they're present. So the two supplements everyone needs to take, whether or not you're doing some kind of fancy nootropic, whether or not you're doing even the awesome stuff that you make at Transcriptions. If you don't have your minerals,
I agree.
And you don't have vitamin D, you won't make as good of a use of a Transcription lozenge. Right? So you got to have these as foundational elements. So vitamin D is awesome, but if you take D without vitamin K2, then you'll have calcification in tissues where you don't want it. So K2 is going to put the calcium into the bones, and D is going to keep it there, right? And they actually both do that. And vitamin A works in opposition to vitamin D. But if you don't have vitamin A, you won't have other things like zinc where they're supposed to go. And even vitamin E controls some of the deposition of iodine in the body. So what you realize is these fat-soluble vitamins that come from animals, they don't come from plants. Plant-based vitamin A is actually not vitamin A. It's a cheap substitute food companies are trying to give you.
You mean beta-carotene from carrots?
It doesn't convert to retinol at a meaningful ratio. You need retinol. So you take vitamin D3, which is cholecalciferol. You take vitamin A in the form of retinol, not fake vitamin A, just like you eat meat instead of fake meat, because fake meat isn't food. And then you take your vitamin K2 and maybe a little K1. There's some evidence for K1, but K2 is most important. K1 comes from kale along with the load of anti-nutrients. But K2 comes from, dairy. Grass-fed dairy. Who would have thought? That comes from animals, doesn't it? And it can come from eating animals themselves too at smaller amounts. And then vitamin E, you get some of that in plants for sure, but you get better quality from animals.
And you like mixed tocopherols, right? The one with like the delta and gamma tocopherols instead of just
and tocotrienols, especially.
Tocotrienols, right.
Yeah, and so the stuff from annatto is probably the most powerful.
I have a story for you. I think you already know this, but the guy who trained me in medical informatics was the guy who actually pioneered medical informatics throughout the world, and he was in a TB sanatorium. He was not treated for TB tuberculosis, and the treatment was to bring them out in sunlight, right? Actual fresh air. And and it worked, he got healed from it. And the two things actually came out of that. After they started, someone had the bright idea of putting them out in the sun, but with glass in front. And so the glass actually bounced the UVB responsible for the formation of vitamin D, right? And it was found also that vitamin D actually creates antimycobacterial called cathelicidin, and actually kills the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And that was the cycle there. But someone's bright idea of putting patients out in glass in sunlight actually just totally and fortuitously backfired on all of us. Then for vitamin A, I also would like to add, Dave, and you know this, that the receptor for vitamin D is called the retinoid X receptor, and it's actually a vitamin A component. So, these are the things that geeks like us know. It's harder to impart it to the public, but when I'm seeing with my own patients and clients, I just had one yesterday, for example, that had a deficiency of vitamin A for 10,000 IU daily needed to be substituted. These are new types of deficiencies that I'm seeing now that are very high. A used to be very low incidences for me, but I'm now seeing D is actually you recommend 70 to 90 nanograms, right?
Yeah.
I see this, and I can tell you this in my practice, is that once I am able to hit 60 with my patients or my clients, their diseases seem secondary, and I am not saying that to promote it, but I'm saying that as an observation. It's like, even if they have heart disease, it's like you really see how important this vitamin is, and DAIC, of course, functions as a network.
It's funny because so many people are spending all this money on drugs, and they're going to the gym, they're sweating all over each other, and they have low vitamin D and like low vitamin A, and all that work doesn't pay off. If you don't have that. It's sort of like saying, I'm going to build a house. I got the hammer, I've got the wood, I've got the saw, but I didn't buy any nails.
Right.
You're going to kind of have to have all this for it to work. So Smarter Not Harder, I just want people to know the things that matter the most, because I think your time and your energy are the most precious thing you have. So I don't want you wasting it doing stuff that barely works. And I don't want you doing something that does work but not getting results because you didn't have the basics. And I mean, you and I have both formulated cognitive enhancing substances and testosterone enhancers, all these cool, sexy, like interesting supplements with herbs from all over the world. And that's fun. But vitamin DAIC, trace mineral,
vitamin DAIC and minerals is unsexy, right?
Yeah. I almost didn't want to write a book about them because it's hard to market those. But look, that's what matters. And just do that first. And then take your cool, I made out with a Smurf transcriptions thing,
later.
But you do that.
Give me the evidence of the blue underwear later. So Dave, for the clinics of health optimization, medicine, and practice, which is what I started to teach how to request for, analyze, and interpret clinical metabolomics, right? The tests include metabolites of glucose metabolism, such as those found in your mitochondria. Tell me, why are mitochondria, or why is bioenergetics a central actor in your book?
Well, the things that make up your meat operating system are primarily mitochondria. So in my model of biology, because I am a computer science and distributed systems guy, and I have a degree in part of the field of AI. So like I think about large numbers of small computers. And each cell itself is a computer. And inside of it, each mitochondria is a computer. They're environmental sensors, computers, and the computer makes a decision. They're kind of dumb computers. And the decision it makes can be to make electricity, to make inflammation, to make sex hormones, to fold proteins, to make serotonin, to make melatonin, to make useful stuff in the body. And we know it's a collective consciousness because we know how they signal with each other. It's via something called quorum sensing. This is how mitochondria all vote with each other to decide what reality looks like. And they use algorithms that are almost identical to the cutting edge crypto algorithms that we use to establish trust. And I interviewed Lehman Baird from Carnegie Mellon about that on my show. And so it's really interesting. Our biology is so incredibly efficient that our most efficient technology systems are now starting to mirror the algorithms inside our body. And it's really fascinating to a nerd like me and a nerd like you. But mitochondria are central because they're the first line observers of reality, and they make a decision a third of a second before you get to see the results.
Right.
And that's why in Smarter Not Harder, most of what we're doing here is we're modifying your exposome so that your mitochondria will change their behavior, which then changes how you feel, and it changes your behavior. And
thank you now for really, really helping me push out the term exposome because it's such an elegant word.
I love that word. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things, Dave, that we test also in clinical metabolomics are, essential amino acids, remember the mnemonic private Matt Hill, and then omega 369 levels, which you also explain in the book. Can you explain what omega 6 fatty acids are and why are they a double-edged sword?
Well, omega-6 fatty acids are a type of fat that has many locations where oxygen could stick. That's what polyunsaturated means. That means poly means many, and unsaturated, anywhere an oxygen sticks to it, it'll become oxidized and thus inflammatory. Your body needs some omega-6 fats, unquestionably. So that you can say they're essential, but maybe 1 or 2%. Grass-fed meat is 1.6% omega-6 fat. You will never run out of omega-6 fat on a normal diet. If you're on a zero-fat diet or doing some weird diet where you only have chemically extracted fat or something, but we don't have to worry about running out of omega-6s. The problem is that they're unstable in light. They're unstable in heat and in air. So when you go to a restaurant, they are using omega-6 fats. We replaced the saturated fats. Saturated fats don't break down in heat and light very well at all. So they're very stable and our body loves them. In fact, they're pro-metabolic. Omega-6 fats are things that are pro hibernation. They actually slow your metabolism. That's what bears eat a lot of is omega-6 and even omega-3s in excess. So they can get really fat and then their metabolism slows down for winter. If you're
I remember we have a term for them, Dave. We have a term for them, what you just said. They are lardaceous fats. Lardaceous.
I love that word. I'm going to start using it. I'm just going to walk up to people and go, you're looking lardaceous today.
Yes, exactly.
The French fries are lardaceous. It's funny because the seed oil industry, mostly led by Crisco of all places, they had a thing about tropical fats and hard fats and how they were bad for you, even though we're made of those hard fats. So they were trying to sell canola and soy and corn oil because it was cheaper and more available in the US. So liquid oils were good and hard fats were bad. And I'm going to turn that around and say, for the most part, it's the liquid oils that are bad. Like, ew, gross, a liquid oil. Do you want to look like a liquid oil? Like, do you want to be dripping off your bones? Or do you want to be made out of like the kind of fat that humans are made out of, which is saturated fat?
Right. Okay. Now, Dave, we come to the fun part. Since you so neatly put in hacking targets in there, I'm just going to go sort of like pick one hack per target of that you sent in there, that you wrote out in there.
Before we do that, Ted, I just want to say those hack targets came out of Upgrade Labs. And there are dozens of them opening across the US and Canada right now. It's a franchise. So you can go to ownandupgradelabs.com and you can open a franchise in your neighborhood if there isn't already one opening. So these are available at facilities now for the first time ever. But keep going. That's where the targets come from.
To augment that, Dave's hacks per target is quite comprehensive, so I encourage you to actually get his book. I'm only going to discuss one hack here that is that will be interesting for us. For the target is strength and cardiovascular fitness. You say in your book, and I quote, "Steady state cardio is stupid and probably counterproductive at high levels." I love that statement. The first hack I chose here is a mid-level hack called Rehit. Can you explain this to us briefly?
Sure. People who have been following you or people who have been listening to me know that about 10, 12 years ago, we started talking about high intensity interval training as being better than doing long runs. And it is, but that still is really uncomfortable. It's 15 minutes where you sprint and then walk, sprint, walk, and you get better results. But since then, in the world of biohacking, we've been doing more and more research and saying, well, what's the exact amount of sprint you should do? What's the exact amount of walking you should do? And at Upgrade Labs, what we're doing now is something called Rehit, with an artificial intelligence or AI-driven bicycle that looks at your heart rate, looks at exactly how much exertion you should do. And what we've found is that it takes 2 10-second bursts, and that's it. And it takes about 5 minutes. And it's actually so surprising. So you're pedaling on the bike and it's so slow, it's boring. And literally the bike is like, slow down. No, you're going too fast. So it's like you're taking the most leisurely stroll in a park. And then bam, hit it really hard. And all of a sudden the pedals won't move and you're really pushing and it's just draining all the glycogen in your muscles. And then immediately deep breathing exercises. And you do that to lower your heart rate quickly. So the body, this mitochondria, all the stress systems, the nervous system, they go, oh, we got away from the tiger, but we have tons of energy right now and we're safe. Because we're safe, let's take the energy and put it into improving versus what you would have done even with high intensity interval training. You would have said, okay, time for another one. And you would have just kept doing it too much. So it turns out it was classical slope of the curve biology. And this Rehit style training, that's the one that gets you a 12% improvement in your VO2 max if you do 5 minutes 3 times a week. And during this 5 minutes, you do not sweat. You don't have to get out of your street clothes unless you're wearing a dress because you can't ride a bike in a dress.
What about high heels, Dave? Do I have to get out of my high heels?
I wear my high heels because you only need your toes when you're pedaling.
Guys, you have to read about Dave's movement hack where he explains beer can breathing. It's there in the book. And we go to the next target, which is energy level and metabolism. You mentioned the supplement Active PQQ in your book. Can you tell us what it does?
Sure. PQQ is, in fact, as far as I know, I might have been the first guy to put it in a formula, at least the active form, about 10 years ago when I was with Bulletproof, the company I founded. What PQQ does is it makes mitochondria work better. And the problem with a lot of PQQ, in fact, most of what you can buy, is as soon as it hits stomach acid, it turns into rocks in your stomach and you can't use it. Active PQQ is buffered so that it doesn't turn into rocks in your stomach, and you can take it and then you'll absorb it. And you can even do PQQ topically, like so there are some face creams and all that have it. But when your cells have PQQ, magically you just make more energy more efficiently. When you think about it,
Dave, I don't know the answer to this. Does it affect the ratio of cardiolipins in the mitochondria at all? Or is it a different thing?
No, I don't believe it's affecting cardiolipin. I know that cold therapy will do that. And probably idebenone and CoQ10 will do that. But I don't believe
not
but
PQQ.
What it does do, interestingly, is it changes the ratio of NAD plus to NADH. And a lot of people have heard of NAD therapy because of all the anti-aging research on it. I've done several shows on it. You probably have too. So PQQ is another way to influence bioenergetics in the cell that would work in conjunction with NAD. But the interesting thing is, if you can take it and absorb it, and the one I formulated is called Unfair Advantage for Bulletproof, and it's still on the market, it's liposomal. So anything that gets it past the stomach acid is going to be really good. And then all of a sudden, because your brain uses the most energy per square centimeter, the brain and heart do. You take it, man, like your thoughts become more focused. And it's not a classical nootropic at all. It's a cell energizer. But what you'll find, anything that makes your mitochondria better at turning air and food into electricity is in itself a nootropic, just like, I don't know, methylene blue.
Right. Now, Dave, from a supplement to an actual instrument or a device, how does a pulsed EMF affect your energy level and metabolism?
This is something
I know this will be in your upgrade labs.
Yeah. And it's something that it's hard to do at home because there's a whole variety of systems. There are some that are marketed as for home use, but you can't actually feel them doing anything. And maybe they're doing some cell signaling, but the kind I'm talking about at Upgrade Labs, there's big heavy coils, and you use it, and you'll actually see like if it's your bicep, you see like, see my camera will follow me. It does like a twitching thing. Like you can actually see it, even if you're not trying to twitch your muscle. It's so much electricity that it generates an electrical current in the cells. And what it does is it opens and closes cell membranes, which allows toxins out. And it's kind of like weightlifting for the cell membrane. One of the side effects of it is that it drives minerals into bones and cells in a massively effective way. I had to have bone surgery on my foot where they took the primary big bone in my foot and cut 3 millimeters out of it. I was awake during this because it was all numb. So why not? I was talking with the surgeon. And I heard the bone saw, and it goes, and he looks at the nurse and goes, "Is this guy human? Like, I'm having a hard time sawing through his bones." That's because I take yeah.
Maybe he needed a diamond saw.
I think so, the adamantium skeleton. But what happened there is I do pulse the electromagnetic frequencies at Upgrade Labs. I do my Danger Coffee with trace minerals, and I take a mineral thing, and I take a vitamin Dake. And when you do those things, bone density is a great signal for whether or not you have a functioning metabolism, whether or not you're going to get diabetes. And he said to me afterwards, he's like, "Dave, I operated on a patient, same surgery, this morning, right before you. And that person was half your age and their bones cut like butter." And that's what a plant-based diet does for you. It gives you buttery, soft bones. And if you get enough minerals and you do what I'm talking about, you are hard to kill.
Right. I know, Dave, that many people might kill me for this, but after doing this for a few decades, my most difficult patients to get back to metabolic balance really are vegetarians and vegans. And, I know that I'm going to get flack for that statement, but, when you come to me severely depressed after 20 years of, being a vegetarian, it's really a lot of work to get you back. Right.
Ted, you're going to get flack for that statement for the simple reason that people who are deficient in minerals because of their diet are easily agitated.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Now, since the target is brain and neurofitness, can you explain to me what HUSO is? The vagal stimulator? You disclosed that you invested in it, so there must be something that must be very interesting in that technology.
About HUSO, interesting.
Yes.
This is one of those things where I thought it was worth talking about. HUSO isn't technically vagal stimulation, although it does work on the vagal nerve. What I'm looking for in the chapter on cognitive enhancement is how do I make the brain get a signal so it'll change faster than you could do with meditation or crossword puzzles, right? Because that's like, well, you sit in a cave and look at a wall. And you could do these things. So HUSO is a technology where you close your eyes, put on a mask, listen to headphones, and then there are these little vibrating things. I know, they're almost like speakers, transducers they're called, and they go on your wrists and your ankles. And when they vibrate, the vibration talks to the cell membranes in your body, and they vibrate in conjunction with what you hear. And I've had some of the craziest experiences from using HUSO, where you're laying there, and it's very different than using just sound to modify the brain, which is a very well-tested thing to do. So they added the idea that you could get it into the body. There's a couple other technologies I write about in the book. One vibrates your sternum, the other one goes on your wrist or your ankle, and you can wear those during the day. So they're different levels.
Yeah, I was just interested in trying to see what attracted you to invest in a technology like HUSO.
HUSO is the first company I found that was using transducers topically. Since then, 2 others have come out, but they were the only ones that had the headphones in conjunction with what's going on the body. And they sent me their alpha level prototype where I had like a bunch of wires and a Rolls amplifier, like the non-commercialized product. And I'm pretty skeptical, but I test everything. And I tried it, and you and I have both, and we've talked about this on my show when I interviewed you, I think. We've done advanced meditation stuff.
Right.
In caves, actually, stuff like that. So,
yes. I remember being in Bhutan and at the Tiger's Nest monastery, and there was a meditation cave. And I went inside to meditate, and I didn't know there was an actual monk behind me who started chanting.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, this is like otherworldly. It's a very different experience from meditating using, an MP3, even a good sound system. It's nothing, the way these things capture the entire context of what you're trying to do, right? That's
a great way of explaining it, because with the HUSO system, there's something very different than listening to the sounds. And I'm a huge fan of using sounds for meditation. The fact that your body is getting a signal at the same time, like the Tibetan throat singing, it's like it's so low you feel it. So there was something happening. But when I tried this thing out, I'm like, wow, this feels like an exceptionally advanced, like something I would do at 40 years of Zen, or something I would do at a breath work, where my brain dropped deeper into meditative states than I would have expected. What Smarter Not Harder is you're going to say, okay, I care about this. And then there's a list of the technologies that will get you there faster than what you know about today. And I do my best to order them, but you've got to choose your goal first, right? If your first goal is muscles, you're not going to use a vagal tone thing. But if your first goal is stress management, then you're going to have a completely different path through. And it's the personalization that matters that much.
So for the target of resilience and recovery, Dave gives a very good discussion on what makes for good sleep hygiene and sleep, as in hacks in chronobiology. And Dave, the target is longevity. And what I'd like to emphasize here is you introduced the term epigenetics many times before already. How can we hack your epigenome, right? And, these tests that measure your epigenetic age, what do they actually do?
Well, when you're looking at your epigenetic age, the most cutting edge aging tests are looking at DNA methylation or specific immune markers. And these are about 400,000 different points. And it's interesting because you can use that to say, well, people who are this age usually have this much wear and tear on their methylation or their immune system, so you can compare it to other people. I've interviewed Steve Horvath, who created the Horvath clock, who's probably the most known of those. And there's about 10 other aging clocks based on the same set of data where we're just using math to manipulate it. And the reason I'm interested is, I don't know, is what I'm doing working? Because maybe I just look and feel better than ever before, but maybe something's wrong. Maybe I'm aging more quickly than I'm supposed to. And so last time I measured, my age I was about 11 years younger than my chronological age. Perfect. Depending on the test, it could be 5 years younger or 11 years younger, somewhere in the range. And we just don't have great accuracy beyond that. But I'm happy with that, given that I started out as far behind as you could possibly get, given my health stuff as a child.
Yeah, the theme in the last anti-aging conference was actually age reversal medicine, no longer anti-aging medicine, right? And I have always taught my students that we need to follow these new tests that can compare whether or not your illness medicine regimen using drugs versus, these hacks that are personalized for you are working better for you. So you could hold, each person who is responsible for doing this, you could hold their feet to the candle and say, well, this thing is actually making me older and making my systems break down. And that's, that for me is like one of the values of having an epigenetic test. However, Dave, tell me, why don't they want to release the grim age clock? They don't want me to know when I'll get my first cancer.
I don't understand that, right? There's all kinds of reasons where I would say the medical industry doesn't have our best interests at heart.
Yeah.
And it's sad to say, I don't think there are that many evil doctors out there. There are some who are just educated by evil companies in medical school. Most people who are in the medical profession, they want to help people. They want to be healers. And some of them are there because their parents shamed them into doing it. That's that's another issue. But what's happening is if you optimize for profit first, instead of human happiness, what you end up with is a system that creates it. And it's not like one person did this. It's called an emergent complex behavior. And we've studied this a lot since the 90s.
Complex adaptive systems, man.
And what's happening is, here's how to make the most money. It's actually the diet soda business model.
Right.
You tell fat people, like I was, that if they drink diet soda, they'll lose weight, but the diet soda causes them to be fat. So they'll keep drinking more and more, and they'll drink it forever. And you make the most money that way, right? And it's not like you chose to do that, but you just measured what worked in little tiny steps, and you do this, you do that, and eventually you end up at what's called a stable equilibrium, where you sell things that make people sick, but tell them it makes them well, and that's where you make the most money. And by the way, I just defined fake meat substitutes right there. That's what they're doing.
You're right. They're big right now.
Well, and not anymore.
They're big. It's like...
Well, what's big is what's left on the shelf, because there's videos of like hurricanes and people running in to buy provisions, and they strip all the shelves in the store, and all that's left is meat replacements, and they just leave them there. Even when there's a famine, people won't eat that crap.
Dave, I don't know what your position about this. What do you think of 3D printed meat?
I think we should focus on 3D printed politicians first.
Well said, well said. And now we come to my favorite section of the book, which is endless improvement, and my favorite chapter, spiritual strength. Dave, this is personal. How did coming to terms with your emotion help you with your divorce?
Well, I would characterize it as a conscious uncoupling. I'm fortunate that my former wife, Dr. Lana, and I, we both have done a lot of personal development work. We've both done actually months of 40 years of Zen neurofeedback, which allows you to really get into your operating system and understand what your triggers are. And I'm not saying that I can't be triggered. I'm just saying I have fewer bullets in my gun than a lot of people. Because if you can be triggered, you are loaded, right? You want to be unloaded, right? And so to her credit, my former wife also has done a lot of that work. So when the normal emotions around a separation come up, and we have teenagers and all, we can talk about it instead of just being reactive about it. And, we don't always have to agree on stuff, but there's mutual love and respect and a desire for each of us to be happy. And so this was the right move. You have 17 good years together. You don't have to be pissed and angry and vindictive and destructive. I mean, you could, but that seems like a waste of time. In fact, that would be harder, not smarter. And I'm all about smarter, not harder.
I agree, especially that having teenagers is already harder, not smarter.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
In the book, Dave actually outlines the spiritual reset hacks that he did to get him through this difficult time. And I encourage you guys to read what he's done. And the thing is, it's possible to do it step by step. So I really love it.
It is. Absolutely.
So in the chapter, You Do You have a section called Recognize Your Lens on Reality. Can you tell us about the fun experience and its relation to Jeff Hawkins' Thousand Brains theory that posits that the brain is a prediction machine?
So Jeff Hawkins was the guy who invented the first alphabet you could use on a personal digital assistant. So the great granddaddy of these was called the Palm Pilot.
Yes, iPhone. I used to make robots out of them.
Nice. So I was actually at 3Com. I worked there when we acquired Palm Pilot. I've actually met Jeff once. He wouldn't remember it. And I've tried to get him on my show several times, but he just doesn't really do interviews about this. But his real dream was to be a cognitive scientist. So as a computer guy, and a very talented computer guy, he just looked at the brain and has a very convincing book. It's called On Intelligence. And in the book, he talks about how your brain is predicting the future. And if the future matches your prediction, you don't notice anything. But when the future doesn't match your prediction, that might be a threat. So then it tunes in. And it's why when you pick up your car keys, in his example, you don't notice the car keys unless they weigh the wrong amount, even just a little bit. Like, oh, that's weird. So all this stuff that's going on, when I pick up my book, if it was an extra half a pound, I'd be like,
you seem fatter today. Are you pregnant?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So those are the things. And so we notice a lack of what we expect. But what would happen if you programmed your nervous system to expect something different? And in my belief, and now we're getting into the spiritual stuff, and I know you're comfortable there. In quantum biology, we understand that there is a probability of something happening, and that when you observe the probability, it collapses into a particle. So there's a wave that turns into a particle. And this is real science. It's just spooky science. Well, newsflash, you're a third of a second delayed on reality. You are not the observer of reality. You're provably not it. It is your mitochondria are the observers of reality. They collapse the waveform. If you want to build a really crappy world, have highly traumatized, malnourished, overstressed, overexercised mitochondria looking for doom, you can make it in the world around you. Or you can program your meat operating system to look for abundance, to look for kindness, to look for compassion, to look for the ability to say no to idiots in government who tell you not to see your kids or something. And when you do that, you'll find it. And that's why this is such important work.
Yeah, see, that look of the Dave is what I've been looking for throughout this interview. That kind of comfort in the spirituality that spirituality provides. Now, Dave, you're going to kill me for this, but you are the master brander. But at this point, if you were a dinosaur, which you're not, I will call you Equanimus Rex. Why is equanimity the highest spiritual target to strive for?
Well, in Buddhist teachings, there's kind of 3 levels you work through when you start doing personal development, and this is on their path to enlightenment. And the first step is empathy, right? Okay, I can feel someone else's pain, because if you don't have empathy, you're probably the one holding the baton. Not the one saying, hey, let me have freedom, right? So you don't want to be someone without empathy. So you get empathy, but then all of a sudden you're feeling everyone else's pain, and that's not always a good thing, because it takes a lot of energy to do that. But it's better than not being able to feel others' emotions. So then you work from there into compassion. And compassion is a higher level, and compassion is where you automatically wish well for others instead of wishing harm on them. So when the guy cuts you off in traffic, if you have compassion, you go, well, instead of wishing that he dies of fiery, burning death, which is your natural operating system settings until you fix them, you're going to say, well, I hope he makes it to the hospital in time. He must be in a hurry. Now, neither story is real. You just don't know why the guy cut off. But compassion is one where you just wish well on others, no matter what. And that's hard to do, especially to do it automatically without having to choose to. And it's a practice. And eventually you can get compassion turned on most of the time. And then the final step is equanimity, which is even above compassion. And equanimity is when you have the ability to choose your state, and you can stay in that state no matter what happens in the world around you. And the picture for equanimity is the monk meditating in the middle of a hurricane. I mean, there are cases of this documented. People are meditating. They're so deep. They're so in a state that you can pick them up. You can knock them over. You could poke them. They will not come out because they are there until they're done. Right. And I don't know how to do that, but I'm working on it.
It's actually quite interesting because we're both steeped in these types of teachings and traditions, and we know that it's love, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Right? In Christianity, it's like the greatest of this is love, and in Buddhism, the greatest of this is equanimity, and it's really how not to suffer. Right? So, last question. Please give us 3 of your top smarter, not harder hacks to live a happy life.
Oh, man, to live a happy life. All right. I'm going to go to as foundational as possible. So if you can do something that takes a very small amount of work and pays returns across everything you're doing, those are going to score higher on this. So the first one is the combination of minerals, trace minerals and vitamin D. And I'll do a shout out for Danger Coffee there to get your trace minerals, but you don't have to do that. But if you just do those, you'll be happier. You'll be able to make neurotransmitters. Like everything in life is easier if you have those. And if you don't have those, everything feels harder than it is. Okay, you have to do that, I think, as a basic, even no matter what you eat. That's just what you do. That's a non-negotiable for that. And if you want to have a happier life, the other one would be do something painful every day. It doesn't take very much pain, but you just have to do that to show your body that you're in charge and to change your dopamine signaling.
Which includes saying I love you to someone you really hate, right?
Yeah, I think
that's totally painful.
That would probably count. Yeah, I haven't thought of it, but I think it would. But cold therapy is probably your best bet. I'm not saying you have to do cold therapy. I'm just saying jumping in a cold tub is painful enough to make your dopamine signaling work better all day. But it could be anything else that's brief and difficult. And yeah, probably saying I love you to someone who's really wronged you, that would probably do it. I don't know if that creates physical pain versus emotional pain. Hard to say. And the final one, and I'd love to, there's all kinds of spiritual stuff that we could talk about, but those are actually higher level things. And until you do the lower level things, the higher level things are very hard to do. And I'm just going to say, learn how to get a good night's sleep.
I thought you were going to say take psychedelics, but a good night's sleep would do.
I would. Can we have a quick psychedelic side note?
Sure, absolutely. I was just mindful of your time. Here.
I am running out of time, but this is important. So many people are saying, I'm going to go do ayahuasca. And I actually think that's a terrible idea, especially in the context of a lot of people who are not properly trained shamans who are administering it. It's probably the most dangerous of the psychedelics in terms of spiritual risk. What I would say is before you do that, you need to learn how to do EMDR, which you do with a therapist to resolve trauma. EMDR. After that, you should learn breath work, like holotropic breath work, the kind that does things like drugs without the drugs. After that, you should learn either tantric sex or BDSM, because those are things
I'm an expert in both.
You what?
I'm an expert in both.
There you go. Me too. I'm a ninja. No. But I'm serious, because those are things that will put you in those same altered states where you can interact with your operating system. 20% of people experience what they would call a spiritual experience of the divine during orgasm. They just look like they're laying there flopping like a fish, but that doesn't mean they didn't meet God. So that's where you do the editing of your operating system. So you can do those things before you take any drugs. And then you would start with the ones that are better understood, like ketamine with medical supervision, then MDMA, and then GHB, right? And then maybe mushrooms, then maybe LSD, and then maybe ayahuasca. But if you have to do it 50 times, it's not working. I have done ayahuasca twice in my life, in 23 years apart, and I did it with exceptionally well-qualified people, but it's not a party drug. So I don't want people going to psychedelics first. They can be powerful. Do that other stuff in order. Try EMDR, try holotropic breathing. Those are things that are going to get rid of a large number of things. And if you feel like you need more, you'll have a much better experience on the plant medicines.
I hope this message gets through where you are, because it's psychedelic Austin where you moved,
There's a reason I moved to Austin. I mean,
so guys, Dave Asprey's book is dropping into your readers and in the stores on February 28th. Right. Yep. And again, the title is Smarter, Not Harder, The Biohacker's Guide to Getting the Body and the Mind You Want. And if you are a health practitioner and would like to receive clinical training in any of these topics that we discussed about, like clinical metabolomics, exposomics, chronobiology, evolutionary medicine, epigenetics, bioenergetics, or mitochondria and gut immune system or microbiota, come see us at homehope.org. So Dave likes you to do this for yourself, which is an incredible, really way of empowering yourself. But if you'd like to help others, come check out the framework that I've created in order for you to help another one, and in the order that actually Dave is recommending here, which is removal of the friction first, and then basically supplementing you with raw materials, and then checking for the targets. Are you really getting well or better with objective measures? And with Smarter Not Harder, Dave has given you the keys to having actually a smarter, not harder life. And I would like to remind people that Smarter Not Harder, my company, is not a condom company. Thank you so much, Dave.
That is good. It's not a condom company. Thank you, Ted. I appreciate your work. You do a lot of things that I think people don't necessarily see, but I see it, and you're doing great work in the world. So thank you.
And so do you, Dave. And thank you for your latest contribution to the world of health.
You got it.
In this episode, I mapped Dave's Smarter Not Harder hacks into the 7 pillars of health optimization, medicine, and practice, the first and only multi-omics clinical specialty that defines and delivers the standard of care in health, not disease. These pillars are clinical metabolomics, bioenergetics or mitochondria, gut immune system or microbiota, clinical exposomics, chronobiology, evolutionary medicine, and epigenetics. If you want to hack your own health in a smarter, not harder way, read and apply Dave's book in your daily life. If you want to help others hack their health in a smarter, not harder way, and you are a physician or a non-physician healthcare practitioner, come and receive formal training for clinical practice at homehope.org.